In today's liturgy, our Lord, particularly through the gospel passage, but it's also outlined a little bit in the first reading from Isaiah as well. Our Lord tells us we have to go out and be an example, basically. We have to go out and we have to share the gospel. Now, in this past week, in our liturgy, we've seen our Lord has sent out his disciples, particularly his 12 apostles, for the first time in order to preach the gospel he was teaching them. And they come back, having been swarmed with people, having great success, actually, and they report everything to our Lord, and then he says, now come apart and rest. And what happens? They're swarmed with people. They don't have a chance, really, to rest. In any case, he has sent them out. Now he's telling us the same thing here, albeit from a different evangelist. We've been seeing from St. Mark throughout the week. Now we see St. Matthew. And what we're reading here is actually from the Sermon on the Mount. Shortly after our Lord enumerates the 8 Beatitudes, he goes on to this discourse here. How we must go out and share what we have received. When we get well, first of all, we have to recognize that spark of faith, that spark of love of God is already sown in us in baptism, with the indwelling of the Blessed Trinity. It's already here within us. But we have to nurture it and make it grow. Otherwise, it burns out. Right? And that's what our Lord basically is saying. If we don't make it grow, if we don't nurture it, and if we don't go out and share it, what happens? Here he uses the example of salt. It becomes useless. It can no longer perform the work it's given to do, which is to help season the food and make it more palatable. Now it can't do that. And it also helps preserve food. No, it can no longer do that if it loses its power, if it loses the taste. It can no longer do that. And the food actually goes bad. And that's what our Lord is saying. Then it's useless. So if we just stay inside inert and don't do anything, what happens? It becomes useless. And if we don't nurture that flame, it's going to burn out. So our Lord is telling us, no, we have to go out. And we have to be an example, is really what he is telling us. And he uses, in order to show how we have to be that example, he uses the example of the lamp that gives off light. Now, then he tells us, well, does that light then, do we hide it? He uses the example of a bushel basket. Right? A basket, you put it over the light, of course the light actually is going to go out. But it's not meant to be hidden. Light is not meant to be hidden. Right? It's meant to shine out and give light, disperse light so we can see our way, find our way in darkness. In the first reading from Isaiah, we see exactly how we should go about giving that example. Here our Lord is merely telling us we have to go out. We can't just stay back. We have a great grace. We have that love of God within us. How could we want to keep it there and not go out and share it? But we have to be an example. That's what he's telling us. We have to give that light to everyone else. Right? The very first words of one of the most, well, actually it's the most important document of the Second Vatican Council, which is the Constitution on the Church. It was the doctrinal constitution. It's called Lumen Gentium. The light of the nations, as it's translated officially into English. And it's telling us, we have to be that light. We have to go out and be that example. But now how are we going to give that example? Right? Isaiah is giving, he's basically beginning to allude to the corporal works of mercy. The acts of charity we do. I believe he gives 3. But what we do when we simply do the work we do each day, everything we do each day, how we live our day, can be an example to someone else. That's really what he's saying. And we perform them well, and we do it, above all, for the love of God. We are witnessing. We are already evangelizing. We are that example. And that's what we are bidden to go out and do. Just in the ordinary carrying out of each day. Right? And by so doing, what does that do? That's how our Lord finishes this passage here. We are given an example by our good deeds, by our charity, as it's sometimes defined, which actually is charity, strictly speaking, is the love of God for the sake of God. So it starts there, always. we grow in that love for God himself. And we allow God to move within us, through us. That's true charity, that union with God. All right? Now we go and share that love with everyone else, just as God seeks to share his love with us. You see, his love within himself grows so much. It grew, I should say, so much. But he sought to share it. How? Creation. He created all of us so he could share that love with us. That means we also have to have a certain capability, otherwise it would be impossible. And that capability is to love. We have to be able to choose him. It's called a free will. That capability. That's the free will. We must exercise it. So we have to keep choosing. You see, how do we choose? Well, it starts with our prayer. And we should be spending some time in prayer every day, alone with God, in order to achieve that union with him. Right? That we call, well, if that's over and above our vocal prayer, which we should do every day also, but also our meditation. Just some time in silence, alone with God. Just to reflect on what we should do and what God is really calling us to do for him. He's waiting to give us that illumination, you might say, the light, those graces, but we have to ask for them, and we have to listen. We have to be silent within ourselves and listen carefully. And then he begins to bestow those graces on us, and we have to work with them, cooperate with them. We actually saw this earlier too. Cooperate with those graces, and the more we do, the more graces he sends. And the less we do, the less he sends. We start blocking him. To the point that if we're not careful, it gets taken away. So we have to keep working on it. We have to keep doing it. Keep praying every day. And then throughout our activity during the day, we look up every once in a while and just tell God how much we love him. Tell our Blessed Lady how much we love her and how much we need that grace to carry on. And then, again, we seek to perform each work, everything we do. And it can also be play. Well, it is also play. It'll be play, recreation, work, our prayers, everything well. Do it well. All according to the will of God, for him. Then, who knows what an example we might give to someone else who sees us cheerfully, with a smile, doing our work well. Right? Carrying on each day for him might be an example for someone else, and could even convert someone else and bring someone else to love him the way we love him, the way he deserves to be loved, because he is love itself. And one example, I've given it before, but it's a beautiful example, how just an example, simple little example, can bring someone to conversion. Because I do know of a woman who was converted when on one occasion, she was with my parents and my brother, and they went out to a restaurant for breakfast. And my brother made the sign of the cross and said his grace before meals. And she saw that, and she was so touched by that, it brought her to conversion. It was only a few months before she died when she asked for baptism. But it brought her to that conversion. And she died in the order of sanctity. Actually, she died on the Feast of All Saints, let alone. But anyways, that's the type of an example. My brother, I don't know if he even knows that ever occurred. But my mother certainly recounted it to me sometime later. But that example is what led her to her conversion. I think perhaps also her own brother, who also converted on his deathbed as well. So in any case, and it was only, I think, a year or two before she died, when he died. So in any case, but just a little example that we may not even, that we take for granted every day, we tend to take for granted every day, could bring someone to conversion. We may not know it, and that's fine, because then we don't get puffed up with pride and think, well, what can I do? Look what I can do. Because it's not. God is working through you to bring that about. Without that grace, it would never happen. Right? And without our prayer behind that, asking for that, to seek that, it's all, every action then is nothing. All right? The whole point is to unite ourselves with God, to seek his love, to seek him. With that love, then we carry on, seeking only to do everything to fulfill his will. Whether or not we see the fruits, the fruits will be there. We may or may not see them, but there will be. The more we seek to unite ourselves with God, the closer we come to him, the more we allow him to work with us, through us, the more abundant the fruits are. Whether we see them or not, doesn't matter. What's important is that we are doing exactly what God wills, and we're doing it well. Then we are that example, that light, that God is calling all of us to be. And finally, to conclude with the words of St. Augustine, love, meaning love God with all your heart, and do what you are doing. Praise be Jesus and Mary.